A hunter walks back into camp. He's laughing. Nobody else is. Because nobody knows whether he's just discovered one of humanity's greatest inventions or whether he's about to die. He points at a tree, laughs even harder. The rest of the tribe slowly gathers around. One person is clearly worried. Another looks confused. And somewhere in the back, there's almost certainly one guy thinking, "So where exactly did you find that?" It sounds ridiculous. But for thousands of years, this is how humans discovered some of the most powerful substances on Earth. Not in laboratories, not in pharmacies, but by wandering through forests, deserts, mountains, and jungles filled with plants that were quietly manufacturing chemicals far more complicated than anyone could possibly understand. Ancient humans didn't know what dopamine was, or serotonin, or caffeine. They didn't know alcohol was created by yeast. They had never heard the word psychoactive. They only knew one thing. Sometimes nature did really weird things. One berry made your stomach stop hurting. Another made you throw up for 2 days. One leaf gave you energy. Another put you to sleep. One mushroom made colors brighter. Another made tomorrow somebody else's problem. Nature wasn't just a forest. It was the world's largest chemistry lab. The only downside: every experiment used a human volunteer. And volunteers were surprisingly easy to find. Humans have always had one dangerous habit: curiosity. Seriously, think about the first person who looked at a strange mushroom growing out of a dead log and thought, "You know what? I'm gonna eat that." That's either incredibly brave or spectacularly stupid. Sometimes it was both. Most experiments probably ended with someone saying, "Don't ever eat that again." Unfortunately, some of those people probably weren't around to give the warning. That's the part we rarely think about. Every useful plant we know today almost certainly has a graveyard of failed experiments behind it. Not because ancient humans were reckless, because they had no alternative. If your head hurt, you couldn't buy aspirin. If you couldn't sleep, there was no pharmacy. If your leg became infected, there wasn't a doctor waiting in the next village. There wasn't even a village. There was only nature. So people watched. They remembered. They experimented. Slowly, the impossible started becoming predictable. One tree seemed to ease pain. A certain flower settled an upset stomach. Some roots reduced fever. Others helped wounds heal. Knowledge spread the only way it could. Around campfires, parents taught children. Grandparents taught everyone else. There were no books. The smartest person in the tribe wasn't the strongest hunter. It was probably the old woman who kept saying, "No, not that mushroom." But then something happened that medicine couldn't explain. Some plants didn't just change the body. They changed reality. Someone eats a strange mushroom. An hour later, he's staring at the stars like they've just told him the meaning of life. Another person can't stop laughing. Someone else insists they can hear voices carried by the wind. Today, we'd blame chemistry. Back then, what would you blame? Spirits? Magic? The gods? Or would you simply assume the forest had secrets no human was supposed to discover? Here's what's fascinating. You'd expect those experiences to scare people away forever. Instead, humans kept coming back, again and again, across Europe, across Asia, across Africa, across the Americas, different cultures, different languages, different plants. Yet, somehow, they kept reaching the exact same conclusion. Nature wasn't only hiding food, it was hiding experiences. Some made life easier, some made life stranger, and a few made people see the world in ways they never forgot. Which raises a much bigger question. If ancient humans were fighting to survive almost every day, why would they ever choose to get high? Some of the answers are exactly what you'd expect. Pain. Imagine breaking a rib during a hunt. You're still expected to walk, still expected to help, it's still expected to survive. If a plant could dull that pain, even a little, it wasn't a luxury, it was a miracle. The same was true for fever, exhaustion, stomach problems. Nature became humanity's first pharmacy simply because there was nothing else. But then, things get a little harder to explain, because not every drug actually solved a problem. Some just made people feel different. And that's where historians start asking some very interesting questions. Take hallucinogenic mushrooms. They don't help you catch a deer. They don't sharpen your eyesight. If anything, trying to hunt while convinced a tree is giving you life advice is probably a terrible strategy. So why keep eating them? One possibility is religion. Many archaeologists believe altered states of consciousness became part of rituals and cultures all over the world. Imagine the oldest, wisest person in your tribe disappearing into the forest. Hours later, they return with a strange mushroom. That night, the entire tribe gathers around the fire. Stories are told, songs are sung. The healer eats the mushroom and suddenly begins describing visions. Maybe they believe they're speaking with ancestors. Maybe they're asking the spirits where the animals have gone. Maybe they're simply trying to make sense of a world that often made no sense at all. Whether those visions were real or not, the experience certainly was. And experiences like that tend to stick. But here's another possibility, one that's surprisingly human. Maybe, sometimes, people just wanted a break. Think about life back then. No weekends, no vacations, no pizza night, no Netflix. Every day was another day of trying not to starve, freeze, or become lunch. If someone discovered a plant that made everyone sit around the fire, laughing for 3 hours, are we really supposed to believe nobody ever thought, we should definitely do that again? Of course, we can't prove that's why the first people got high. No archaeologist has found a cave painting that says, Friday night with the boys. But humans haven't changed as much as we like to think. We celebrate, we grieve, we tell stories, we dance, we gather around food and drinks. We've always searched for ways to change how we feel, especially after long periods of stress. Our ancestors were probably no different, and they didn't stop with mushrooms. Long before breweries existed, nature had already invented alcohol. All it needed was fruit, some wild yeast, and time. Eventually, someone picked up a piece of fermented fruit. Maybe it smelled strange. Maybe someone else said, I don't think that's good anymore. And then one brave genius replied, only one way to find out. History owes a surprising amount to people making questionable decisions. The same curiosity that discovered medicine also discovered getting drunk. Not every discovery became a tradition. Some plants were too dangerous. Some were addictive. Others could kill you if you guessed the dose wrong. That's why knowledge became one of the most valuable things a tribe could possess. Knowing which plant was useful was important. Knowing how much was often the difference between a memorable evening and becoming a warning story for future generations. So certain people became experts, not because they wore white lab coats, because they remembered. Hundreds of plants, hundreds of lessons, hundreds of mistakes made by people who came before them. In a way, they were walking encyclopedias, just without the encyclopedia. And maybe that's the strangest part of this entire story. Ancient humans weren't surrounded by empty wilderness. They were surrounded by chemicals, painkillers, stimulants, sedatives, hallucinogens, natural poisons, fermented drinks. The forest wasn't silent. It was full of possibilities. Most of them were hidden, waiting for someone curious enough, or desperate enough, to take the first bite. And maybe that's why this story feels strangely familiar. Because we still do exactly the same thing. Not by wandering into forests, but by opening medicine cabinets, ordering another coffee, pouring a drink after a long week, trying to sleep, trying to stay awake, trying to feel better. The substances have changed, the reasons haven't. Ancient humans weren't surrounded by drugs because nature was unusually generous. They were surrounded by them because nature had always been full of hidden chemistry. The real miracle wasn't discovering a single magical plant. It was surviving long enough to discover what thousands of them could do. And maybe, every now and then, after another brutal week of simply staying alive, they looked at each other around the fire, picked the funny mushroom, and decided that surviving was important, but laughing together was worth something too. Maybe that's why this story is so fascinating. We like to think ancient humans were completely different from us. They weren't. They laughed, they experimented, they made terrible decisions. They got lucky. They passed their discoveries to the next generation. Some plants became medicine, some became sacred. Some probably became the ancient equivalent of saying, so, same time, next full moon? The truth is, we'll probably never know the exact reason the first human got high. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it was for pain, maybe it was to speak with the gods, maybe it was to forget a terrible winter. Or maybe, after spending every day trying not to freeze, starve, or get eaten, someone simply found a way to enjoy being alive for a little while. And if that's true, then humanity's oldest tradition might not be farming, or building, or even writing. It might be gathering around a fire, passing something interesting around, and asking the same question people still ask today. You sure this is a good idea? Yeah, probably. Maybe that's how it happened. One curious person, one strange plant, one risky decision. The next morning, they told the rest of the tribe what they'd seen. Some laughed, some didn't believe a word of it, but someone else eventually tried it too. That's how discoveries spread, long before books or science. One story, one experiment, one generation teaching the next. Sometimes it became medicine, sometimes it became tradition, and sometimes it became history. Most discoveries began with curiosity. The lucky ones simply survived long enough to tell everyone else.